was just another dull day in biology class, the kind where the clock seems to tick slower. It was sixth period on a Friday, and everyone was restless, knowing the weekend was so close and summer break just a few weeks away. We didn't have a test that day, unlike some of my friends in their other classes. Our teacher, Miss Bennett, decided to lighten the mood by playing trivia games online with us. She was always relaxed like that, especially when the weekend was around the corner. We were working through a movie trivia quiz when it all happened. I remember it clearly because my friend Aaron had just answered a question correctly. The answer was Jurassic Park. That's when the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. His tone was shaky and urgent as he announced, "This is not a drill. Teachers, initiate lockdown immediately." Chills ran down my spine, and I felt goosebumps rise on my arms. Miss Bennett, usually calm and easygoing, snapped into action. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and told everyone to move to the corner of the room, away from the windows. The room fell into an eerie silence. About 2 minutes later, the faint hum from the projector stopped, signaling that the power had been cut. My classmates and I exchanged nervous glances, realizing something serious was happening. A few minutes later, we heard it, the sound of someone screaming down the hallway. The voice was loud, erratic, and full of rage. 2 girls in the corner started crying softly, which only made the situation feel more intense. The screams grew louder, closer, until they were right outside our door. The man started banging on the lockers, shouting, "I'll get all of you!" It was horrifying. My heart raced as I tried to stay as quiet as possible. Miss Bennett put a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. The banging shifted to our classroom door. Then one of the girls couldn't hold it in anymore and screamed, "No!" Her outburst seemed to provoke the man further. He pounded on the door harder, yelling, "Let me in!" By now, the crying had turned into sobbing from a few classmates. It felt like time had stopped. Eventually, the banging and screaming faded as the man moved further down the hallway. His voice echoed until it disappeared altogether. 10 minutes passed, though it felt like an hour. Finally, the principal's voice came back on the intercom. He explained, in a surprisingly candid way, that an apparently unstable man had entered the school and attacked a staff member near the entrance. She had managed to escape and alert someone, but it wasn't clear if the intruder was armed. This was before our school had installed security cameras or hired guards, so the building was vulnerable. Staff members had searched every hall and room but couldn't locate the man. The principal instructed teachers to lock their doors and continue class as best as they could. The most chilling part came later that night. One of the janitors working late found the man asleep in a supply closet near the science wing. According to rumors that circulated the next day, he had a large knife tucked into his waistband. The janitor must have startled him because by the time the police arrived, the man had fled the scene. To this day, I have no idea what happened to that man. I can only hope he got the help he needed. But that memory has stuck with me, a constant reminder of how fragile safety can feel. My school had 2 lunch periods. The first one was for all the 7th graders and some 8th graders, while the second was for the remaining 8th graders and all 9th graders. This incident happened in early November, on a chilly and windy day, during the first lunch period. I was sitting with my friends, enjoying the break, when I heard 3 loud bangs. At first, I thought it might be construction noise from a nearby site, but before I could think too much about it, people started screaming. The lunch area erupted into chaos. I assumed everyone was just overreacting, but then a teacher ran in, yelling for everyone to get inside the auditorium immediately. The kids who were in line for food had to leave their trays and rush inside with the rest of us. My friends and I joined the crowd as we were herded into the large auditorium. It was a massive space with tall windows along the back wall. As soon as we entered, staff started pulling down heavy curtains to block the windows, and teachers stood guard at every door. My friend Ellie was as curious as I was. She asked one of the teachers what was going on, but they just shook their head and told her to stay seated. When Ellie came back, she told us what she had overheard. Apparently, across the street from our school, there was a man who had locked himself inside his apartment, refusing to come out. He had been served an eviction notice and was threatening to harm himself and anyone who tried to approach him. That wasn't the worst part. Ellie also mentioned that the man was known to be unstable and had been seen outside the school before, watching students in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. It turned out he was also listed as a registered sex offender, which sent chills through all of us. We ended up staying in the auditorium for over an hour, which felt like forever. The staff tried to keep us calm, but it was hard not to imagine the worst. Eventually, we were escorted back to our classrooms, one group at a time, under the watchful eyes of the security guards. Later that day, I talked to my friend Sarah, who lived in one of the houses across from the school. She told me that last year on Halloween, she saw the same man standing in his window, carving strange symbols into his arm. He had written, "Stay away," or else on the glass in what she assumed was fake blood at the time. She thought it was just a creepy Halloween prank, but after this it was clear he was genuinely disturbed. We were all relieved when we found out that the police managed to handle the situation without anyone getting hurt. Still, knowing someone like that lived so close to our school was terrifying. It's something none of us have been able to forget. I'm 23 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at a private academy I attended as a teenager. It's a part-time role as a technology assistant, and I'm stationed in the storage wing of the lower level. The lower floor is cluttered and chaotic, but there's a small, cozy office down there with just enough space for me and my two colleagues, Laura and Nate. The office is surprisingly well equipped. It has 3 large desks, a couple of mini fridges, a mounted flat-screen TV, and even an air conditioner, a rare luxury in the rest of the building. Along with all the tech equipment and servers, it felt like my own little haven. I got the job because 2 of my former computer teachers, Ms. Harper and Mr. Ryan, were huge supporters of mine and went out of their way to recommend me. Everything had been going great until a few weeks ago. That day, Laura and Nate were upstairs sorting through inventory. I decided to have my lunch break alone in the office. I had just unwrapped my sandwich when my phone buzzed with a call from the main office. One of the staff members told me the school was on lockdown and that someone potentially dangerous had entered the building. There wasn't much I could do except turn off the lights, as the office didn't have an actual door, just a large, open archway. The only door leading to the lower floor itself didn't even have a functional lock. For safety, I turned off all the lights, dimmed my computer screen, and sat there in silence, texting Laura and Nate to check on them. Neither of them responded. The minutes dragged on as I nervously scrolled through my phone, trying to distract myself. I couldn't hear what was happening upstairs, and I wasn't allowed to make calls. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the creak of the basement door. My heart skipped a beat as the sound echoed through the hallway. Footsteps followed, slowly descending the stairs. I froze. My first instinct was to call out for Laura or Nate, but something told me to stay quiet. The footsteps approached the office, and then I heard them stop right outside the archway. I quickly slid under my desk, holding my breath as my heart pounded in my ears. The room stayed silent for what felt like forever. Then, my phone let out a soft ding, and I felt my stomach drop. I had forgotten to mute it. The sound of the footsteps came closer, stopping just in front of my desk. Before I could think of what to do, a hand reached down and grabbed my arm, pulling me up. Standing in front of me was a man wearing a blue flannel shirt, dark jeans, and a cap. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm just hiding down here too. What's going on upstairs?" I hesitated before answering. "I don't know." "Who are you?" The man avoided my question, looking around the room instead. "Is there another way out of here?" he asked. I nodded toward the hallway, saying, "There's an exit that way." I tried to stay calm, but something about him felt off. I glanced at my phone, remembering the text I had just received. It was from Nate. "Don't come upstairs. There's a guy with a gun. He shot Mr. Nelson, and he's wearing a blue shirt and a cap." I reread the message and everything clicked. Slowly, I looked back up at the man who was now staring at me. My expression must have given me away because his face hardened, and he took a step toward me. Panic overtook me, and I bolted toward the stairs. A deafening gunshot rang out behind me, the sound bouncing off the walls. I felt the rush of air as the bullet narrowly missed me, striking something metal. I didn't stop running until I burst through the door at the top of the stairs. The police were stationed at every exit, and as soon as the man emerged, they tackled him to the ground. Thankfully, Mr. Nelson survived the gunshot, though no one really understood what caused the shooter to target him. Some said it was a personal grudge, but the details were never shared publicly. All I know is that the sound of that gunshot and the sight of that man's cold stare will stay with me forever. When I was 17, I was in my junior year of high school. Our school had a 9-period schedule, and my 5th period was lunch, followed by my astronomy class. Astronomy was held in one of 2 classrooms tucked away in the basement of our school. The basement wasn't originally designed for classrooms. It used to be a maintenance area but had been remodeled to fit a growing student population. Even so, it retained its eerie vibe when empty. The lighting was dim, and there were no intercoms or loudspeakers, which meant no morning announcements down there. Still, most students found the basement classrooms appealing. It was air-conditioned, had a private bathroom, and the classes down there tended to be easier. That day we had a quiz in astronomy. I usually finished early, so when I was done I texted my friend Jason, who was in the other basement classroom, to meet me in the bathroom because I was bored. He replied with a quick "on my way," and within moments he joined me in the small restroom. We were joking around, wasting time, when Jason glanced at his phone and told me the school was on lockdown. At first we grinned at each other. None of the teachers had noticed we'd left class, which meant we technically had the freedom to wander around without getting caught. We decided to sneak upstairs to see what was going on. When we opened the basement door, we were surprised to find the lights in the hallways turned off. Normally, even during a lockdown, the lights stayed on. The only illumination came from the faint light pouring through the glass doors in the lobby. Suddenly, the idea of exploring didn't seem so fun anymore. Jason stepped further into the hallway and peered into the shadows. "Who's that?" he whispered. I looked where he was pointing. A man was emerging from the darkness, his movements slow and deliberate. At first I thought he might be a teacher, but as he got closer, I realized he didn't look like any staff member. His clothes were disheveled, like he hadn't changed in days. "Let's go," I hissed, pulling Jason back toward the basement. We slipped through the door, quietly shutting it behind us. Both classroom doors in the basement were closed and their lights were off. Not wanting to cause a scene, we decided to hide in the bathroom. I flipped off the light as soon as we got inside, and we crouched in the corner stall. The silence in the room was suffocating. There were no background noises, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional drip from the sink. Then the bathroom door creaked open. A sliver of light from the hallway spilled into the room before the door clicked shut again, plunging us back into darkness. My heart pounded as I heard slow, deliberate footsteps approaching our stall. Whoever it was, they stopped right outside. The sound of heavy breathing filled the room. It was uneven, like the person was out of breath or barely containing their rage. Jason leaned toward me and whispered, "We have to crawl to the other stalls." The room was so quiet that even his whisper felt deafening. The breathing outside our stall stopped abruptly. Then, with a jolt, the stall door rattled violently as the person tried to force it open. "Go," I whispered urgently. We scrambled under the partition to the next stall, then the next, until we were on the opposite side of the bathroom. Just as we reached the door, the person began pounding on the stall we had left. I flipped the light back on as we burst out of the bathroom. In the sudden brightness, I saw the man from upstairs standing in the corner, his head tilted as he stared at us. We didn't wait to see what he would do next. We bolted to Jason's classroom and pounded on the door until the teacher let us in. As soon as we were inside, Jason blurted out what had happened, his words spilling over each other in panic. The teacher locked the door and listened carefully, his face growing graver with each word. Then Jason mentioned something that made my stomach drop. "He had a gun," Jason said. I hadn't seen a weapon, but Jason insisted there was one sticking out of the man's pocket. The students in the room, who would normally be laughing at such a wild story, were huddled in the corner looking as terrified as we were. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the classroom door, followed by a couple of girls stifling their screams. The man was standing just outside, looking through the narrow window and jiggling the doorknob. After a few moments of banging on the door, he stormed off down the hallway. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. The teacher occasionally asked us questions, shaking his head at our answers, but mostly, we just listened to the silence outside the door. Finally, a call came through instructing us to leave the building single file. When we got upstairs, the police were everywhere. Jason and I did our best to describe the man to them. A police officer patted me on the back and told us to go home. The incident didn't make the news, and none of us ever found out if the man was caught. But I'm certain of one thing. That man wasn't just wandering the halls. He was looking for someone, or something. And if he had found us in that bathroom, I don't think we would have walked away. I spent 20 years as a police officer in New Jersey, and during that time I responded to countless calls. But one call still haunts me, the most disturbing of my career. It happened on a stormy, dark day. Dispatch called my car number to respond to a lockdown at a nearby middle school. For legal reasons, I'll leave out the name of the school, but the details are etched into my memory. A suspicious man had been seen exiting a white van parked behind the school and entering through the rear door by the boys' locker room. I arrived at the scene within minutes, pulling up right next to the white van in the back parking lot. The vehicle was empty, and all the doors, including the trunk, were locked tight. I made my way to the back entrance, a red door leading to the gym hallway near the locker rooms. The main lights inside the school had been shut off, leaving the building cloaked in darkness. I unholstered my flashlight, gripping it tightly as I stepped inside. The sound of rain pelting the building outside only added to the eerie atmosphere. As I moved toward the lobby, a woman cautiously emerged from the front office. She whispered that the man had been last seen heading toward the boys' locker room and warned me to be careful. He might be armed. I radioed for backup, and dispatch assured me help was already en route. Still, I knew time wasn't on my side. I retraced my steps to the gym hallway, where I found the door to the boys' locker room. It was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open as quietly as I could. The room had no windows, so the only light came from my flashlight. The faint hum of an air vent overhead filled the silence, but over it, I could hear faint, irregular noises, scratches and soft taps on the locker doors. Protocol dictated that I announce my presence, but the tension in that room was suffocating and I hesitated. With my flashlight in one hand and my gun in the other, I moved cautiously through the rows of lockers. Strangely, the sounds seemed to shift. They were always coming from the opposite side of the room, no matter where I stood. I reached the corner near the door to the bathroom when the deafening sound of a locker slamming shut in another room made my heart skip a beat. My flashlight quivered as I swung it toward the noise, which had come from the football team's locker room adjacent to the main one. There was no door separating the two spaces, just an open archway. The football lockers were much larger than the standard ones, towering over me as I stepped inside. Summoning my courage, I finally shouted, "Police!" Almost immediately, a muffled scream pierced the air. "Help!" A boy's voice cried out, his panic unmistakable. I followed the sound to a row of lockers. The boy was pounding on the inside of one of them, his voice strained and desperate. When I found the locker he was trapped in, my stomach churned. I reassured him as best I could, telling him I'd be right back, and sprinted out of the school. When I reached the parking lot, my heart sank. The white van was gone. I cursed myself for not noting the license plate when I first arrived and immediately radioed dispatch, urging them to issue an alert for the van. Back inside, I instructed the front office staff to call an end to the school day and send someone with a key to the locker room. I returned to the boy, staying with him until help arrived. When the locker was finally opened, I saw the blood on his arm. His skin was sliced from where the man had cut him, likely as the boy resisted being forced into the van. Later, we pieced together what had likely happened. The man had held the boy at knife point, trying to lead him out of the school through the back door. At some point, the boy had either escaped or been forced into the locker as the man tried to figure out his next move. A week later, the van was spotted in a 7-Eleven parking lot. The man was arrested without incident and identified by both the boy and other witnesses. Even now, I shudder to think what could have happened if that boy hadn't resisted or if I hadn't arrived when I did. I've dealt with a lot in my career, but that day in the stormy darkness of that middle school is one I'll never forget. I was staying at a Hampton Inn in New Jersey while visiting Rowan University, a college I was considering attending. Since my family couldn't join me, I was traveling alone. After a full day of campus tours, I grabbed dinner at a nearby restaurant and returned to my hotel around 8 p.m. I planned to head back to the university the next day. About an hour after getting back to my room, an unexpected alarm blared through the room. A white light began flashing from the ceiling corner, accompanied by a looping message. "All Hampton Inn guests, please remain in your rooms. This is a lockdown." I didn't even know hotels had lockdowns, let alone alarms like this. At first, I was more intrigued than worried. The alarm eventually stopped, but the flashing light and repeating message continued every 20 seconds or so. By 9:30, I was trying to settle in for the night. I turned on the TV as background noise while I changed into my pajamas and brushed my teeth. Once ready for bed, I turned off the lights, crawled under the covers, and let the TV play for about 30 minutes before shutting it off. The light was still flashing, an obnoxious, bright white burst every few seconds. It was irritating enough that I was debating whether to call the front desk to find out what was going on. That's when the phone rang. Assuming it was someone from the front desk about the alarm, I answered. A concerned voice on the other end told me to stay calm and leave my room immediately. Confused, I asked, "What's going on?" The woman responded in a serious tone, "There's someone in the room with you. Get out now." The phone slipped from my hand as I froze in place. A wave of panic rushed over me. Part of me wanted to run, but another part was too curious not to check. I scanned the room. I looked under the bed. Nothing. I checked the bathroom, empty. Then my eyes fell on the closet, a sliding wooden door near the bathroom. It was open just a crack. Through that small gap, I saw it, a face. For a moment, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Then, as the closet door slid shut, the reality hit me like a punch to the chest. I bolted for the door, not daring to look back. Down at the front desk, the staff showed me security footage from earlier in the evening. The video revealed a sketchy-looking man wandering the hallways, apparently searching for a specific room. When he reached my door, he opened it with a card he must have stolen or copied. Then he disappeared inside. The authorities arrived not long after and escorted him out in handcuffs. He was a short man, likely in his 40s, with a disturbing air about him. As he passed me in the lobby, he gave me a look, a chilling, knowing expression, as if he recognized me immediately. The thought still sends shivers down my spine. He had been in that closet for over an hour, watching me, waiting,